Just going to do a quick case study on how we implemented our heat load action plan. You need to conduct a risk assessment annually before the summer months begin, around October, to determine the level of risk posed by excessive heat load to your cattle. Risk assessment needs to be conducted using the approved industry model obtained from the Catestone website or the MLA website. You need to find out where your closest weather station is. Sandalwood's closest weather station is Oakey, but we also have our own on the feedlot weather station that we have access to every day. You need to consider these factors: the local climatic conditions, cattle breed, health status, coat colour and type, cattle conditions, days on feed, healthy cattle or sick cattle, and genotype. Also, feedlot class needs to be considered. This relates to your feedlot licence from the State Ag Department, in Queensland the QDPI. Sandalwood is a Class 1, which means that under our licence requirements, pen cleaning by mounding or removal is to be carried out in a maximum interval of 10 weeks. Weather permitting, or more frequently if the manure pack depth reaches 100 millimetres. Cleaning under the fence lines must also be carried out. Water temperature. We did a trial in January to determine our water temp. We did this using the thermometer that we manually dipped into the water near the inlet and recorded the results. We found it quite surprising just how high they were. These results are shown on the following table. We are working on having inline thermometers fitted to key locations in the water pipeline, but have hit some hitches, mainly in the supply to date. It is hoped that these inline thermometers will be able to monitor more accurately the temperature of the water being delivered to the cattle. The significance of this is that once the water reaches 30 degrees, the cattle are actually taking on more heat load by drinking. This has a huge impact on the outcomes of a heat load event, as you can imagine. The hospital pens were the highest. We had it's just because there's less cattle and the water doesn't turn over as often. Documentation required. The documentation you require for your action plan together are as followed: a copy of the heat load in feedlot cattle 2006. This is available directly from the MLA website, I hope. A copy of the NFAS circular dated the 1st 2006, excessive heat load guidelines, and access to the Catestone environmental website. You need to print out the risk analysis results from your Catestone program. We printed out many of the possible scenarios according to our different cattle genotypes and keep them in the heat load plan. There is no harm in knowing how your cattle are going to fare through the possible heat load occurrence. Also do your worst case scenario. For example, days on feed, black versus lighted colour, unhealthy or unacclimatised versus healthy, and shade versus no shade. We've done the same one as Des has done, unfortunately. But a possible worst case scenario would be Boss Taurus, black, healthy days on feed 80 to 130 and no shade. 86 is the heat load index where stock began to accumulate heat. And that's just predictions based on historical data of how often the event may occur. Action required. We tried to consider what variables should be changed to compare risk analysis outcomes. We have a range of examples printed and filed for reference. This is the second example of only the health status difference, and it makes 3 points difference. So it's like if they're sick cattle, they're going to be taking on heat at 83 units. Writing the action plan. You need to review management practices as documented in your NFAS QA manual. A site review and an internal audit should be undertaken in the lead up to summer. Ours is done in October. Talk to the feedlot management, nutritionist and vet about what options are available for your feedlot. Remember to be practical. No point thinking you can do something that is physically not possible. Identifying the triggers is important. What is going to get your attention? What is going to change the path of your action plan? Triggers that are important to our action plan at Sandalwood Feedlot are feed intake changes, panting scores, water availability and temperature, weather factors, and predicted heat load units as per the Catestone forecast. This can be found on the website and gives you a 7-day forecast. Monitoring these factors. Animal factors. Panting scores of 3 and above are significant. The time of day also relates to the panting score and its level of significance. If cattle have a panting score of 3 or above early in the morning, this would be a significant trigger. Water monitoring. You need to monitor both availability and temperature. At Sandalwood, we have different levels of monitoring dependent on the assessed severity of a heat event. We start out with 2 or 3 hourly monitoring and increase this to hourly as the situation intensifies. This is an example of a monitoring sheet we use to get an idea on how cattle behaved over a period of time in January. We were curious to see how the cattle reacted throughout the day. This sheet has become an important part of our action plan and is used to record our observations when we are monitoring water and panting scores. Feed factors are also important indicators. At Sandalwood during the summer months, we monitor feed intake changes across the feedlot by monitoring the average consumption for each ration each day. Our trigger for feed intake is a 3 kilogram reduction in 3 days or less. Remember, this is the average consumption across the ration type. An example of our feed consumption sheet. This is filled out daily and then taken with the laptop for bunk callers who look at whilst calling the bunks. Weather factors. The forecast from the Kate Stone program is printed off every day during the summer months at Sandalwood and is taken with the average consumption sheet on the bunk call. At Sandalwood, 50 to 100 accumulated heat units equals high risk. Therefore, we would start 2 to 3 hourly monitoring of the cattle and the water supplies. Over 100 accumulated heat load units is extreme risk, and hourly monitoring will commence. An example of the forecast of the Oakey area. The highlighted section is where stock at Sandalwood would be taking on heat. And this is the charted version that you saw earlier as well. Who, what and when. Who. Make a list of the key people and their contact details. Feedlot manager, livestock manager, nutritionist and vet. Decide who is responsible for specific decisions. A heat load event would be not a good time for confusion. What? Decide what you are going to do about it. MLA's heat load in feedlot cattle is very helpful. It's important to be practical. Don't put things down that you cannot achieve. At Sandalwood, our key tools for heat load management are with cattle movement restrictions, ration changes and specific monitoring. When? Tying in all the triggers at Sandalwood. Panting scores 3 to 3.5. All unnecessary movement ceased and monitoring is increased to hourly. If panting scores is 4, all cattle movement cease and the vet is contacted. If cattle are congregating at water troughs, hourly monitoring and cattle manually managed at troughs to ensure all cattle get a chance to have a drink. Putting it into action. Ensure it's all written down. We chose a flow chart for our action plan. We believe it is easy to follow for all if action is required. Educate everyone. Pen riders, feed truck drivers, pen cleaners and trough cleaners. It's important that everyone has an understanding of the signs of stress in cattle and that they know who to tell. Thank you.